Welcome to InPsightRadio. I am your host, Danielle Egnew, and you are a fly on the wall to everywhere. How are you this week? How are you getting through that Mercury retrograde in Scorpio? How is that faring for you? You know, we are here in the second week of November of 2019. Mercury is going to go direct on the 20th of November of 2019. So if you've been experiencing any of the weight of the shadow aspects of Scorpio, fear, doubt, paranoia, any of the freak out structure during this retrograde, this is where it starts to lighten up. So look ahead. There's a light coming at the end of the tunnel. I think we've all done very well during this retrograde time frame. And really, everybody, rock on, because once the 20th of November hits, we are coming out of this retrograde with some really intense, meaningful lessons. And so if you've been feeling like you've been going backwards instead of here, you actually are going forward, don't worry about it. Sometimes you just, not the way that you came. So that's a big theme right now. You got to go back the way that you came in order to pick up those big lessons, in order to take one step forward. So just know that we're almost out of the retrograde. Pat yourself on the back. And today's topic is so fantastic, I'm going to dive right into it. Today we are talking about the physics of psychics. And not only is that really, really fun to say, because it is, the physics of psychics, the physics of psychics, the physics of psychics, oh my! Yet there is a ton of science that goes into spiritual abilities. And a lot of times, culture, especially Western culture, especially Western Christianized culture, tends to look at spiritual and psychic abilities as woo-woo. As just some mystical channeling ability. And I'm not here to take away from the mysticism. I think that's really cool. Yet, I do think it's important that we recognize that there's a lot of physics to why we break down these psychic and spiritual abilities the way that we do. And I've been having a huge uptick in empaths lately who discern a lot of energy through the heart chakra. I've had a lot of these empaths coming forward asking what's going on. Their level of anxiety is through the roof lately. And we see so many young people, a lot of, my goodness, the teen generations and even in the millennial generations, but younger, the teen generations coming in who are literally crippled with anxiety. And I mean crippled. I know kids who literally are afraid to leave their house because their anxiety is so huge. So of course, what do well-meaning parents do? They take them to the doctor, and the doctor, who is very well-meaning and only working within the medical, framework for everything, diagnoses the child with anxiety and then begins to fill them full of all sorts of medication to try to help and take the edge off of the anxiety. Now, I'm not here to take away from anyone's diagnoses today. I'm simply here to tell you that with all of the big changes in this world, and a lot of them are magnificent, a lot of the changes we have in this world are really amazing. With all of the big changes we have in this world, one of the biggest changes that are upon us in how we choose to look at our wealth of knowledge around psychological disorders, or are we just not dealing with the physics of psychic abilities? Now, of course, I need to put the disclaimer out there that yes, there are all sorts of issues that are physical that can really give us fits and go wrong in the human brain. So chemically and in many other ways. So again, we are talking about when we confuse the dynamics of the physics of really psychic abilities with issues that are purely medical. And I see this happen all the flippin' time. I'm not kidding. I've actually gotten some really nasty Facebook comments. I mean, wicked, creepy, troll, nasty Facebook comments when I've posted things on Facebook that have attempted to draw attention to anxiety outside of emotional or physical trauma and really draw attention to the food we're eating and the types of exercise we are not getting, and never mind the massive amount of empaths that are hitting the planet right now. And the empathic ability, you have to remember, gang, the empathic ability works by pulling energy through the heart chakra And once that energy is pulled through the heart chakra, then it's discerned or pulled apart for all of the emotional imprints that are in that spiritual DNA. And we have a lot of young people coming in right now whose empathic abilities are off the hook. And these kids need to have these big, high empathic abilities because as we go forward with our planet and as we have changes in our ionosphere over the many years, which can be charged with sun particles and radiation, solar radiation, all kinds of things, which can affect our ability to communicate with our cellular devices. Because you got to remember now, the ionosphere is the reflective wall that is high above the earth, that's a shell that refracts communication waves off of the ionosphere and back around the earth. That's how we can beam signals all the way around a round planet, right? Obviously, we can hit, satellites, which of course just angle them and beam them through the ionosphere. Yet our kids are going to need to be able to feel one another, feel the planet. We're going to have changes in how easy it is to get a hold of one another by picking up a cell phone. Now, that's the world they come from. So it's very important that they have other skills, like huge empathic skills, to be able to really key in and focus on each other and be able to feel the world and the earth, because that's going to be how they judge climate change coming up. I mean, obviously, we're still going to have science, but we must evolve as a race. So one of the things that I'm seeing in the physics of our psychic abilities is many people are not understanding how their empathic ability works. And we're going to start with empaths, gang, because we empaths, we're such low-hanging fruit. We can just pluck us off the tree of knowledge and keep on trucking. So one of the things that I like to talk about, especially with the physics of the empathic ability, is that when we are sucking in all of the energy through our heart chakra, and remember, that's how an empath works. We literally pull tons and tons of energy through the heart chakra and then go ahead and decode it and pass it out our back. So the more dense the atmosphere is with people feeling and needing answers and being insecure and fighting and whatnot, the more information we're going to pull through the heart chakra. So that potentially can be more and more chaos, white noise, dissonance. There are many people on this world that are awakening to the fact that the world is on the other end of our consciousness, that we can wake up and decide to experience joy every day. And that's going to completely change what comes into us. It's going to completely change the spiritual physics of our relationships. Choosing to experience joy every single day is going to, no matter what your circumstances are it's going to change the cells in your body. It's going to change the work opportunities that come to you. It's going to change the communication style that other people choose with you. This is really true. It's a true story. So the more that we recognize that the earth, the world, our physical web of reality, that we like to call it, is on the other side of what we're putting into it, then we can more effectively deal with the physics of the psychic ability of being an empath. Because empathy is all about reading energy. Now, the body reads the energy when it's pulled through the heart chakra. Not the mind, but the body. I'm going to say it again, people. It's not the mind that reads the empathic energy that comes through the heart chakra, gang. It's the body. Now, how is that possible? Well, I'll tell you how it's possible, okay? Our body is the spacesuit for our spirit. And our brain manufactures chemicals in order to communicate the energy of the body to the physics or the physicality of the body. In other words, the spirit, our spirit, your soul, talks to your body through a series of chemical cues that are fired off in your brain. Now, your brain is an electromagnetic organ, and so is your heart, okay? So the heart, which again, massive electromagnetic organ, people, it's got electricity running through it. It's why it beats. So you've got this heart chakra, which is a big portal, like a big rivet that holds your spirit into place Well, you've got many chakras, but that's one of your rivets. And all of this energy is coming through it. Then that energy is hitting this electromagnetic center called the heart. So the energy is hitting the energy of your body. And now your brain's job is to feel that impulse of energy come through your chest, go all the way up to the brain, which is the only other electromagnetic organ in your body. And your brain catches that spirit signal that's coming through the flesh, through the translation of energy from the heart, all the way up to the brain. And then the brain's job is to translate the spiritual energy into a three-dimensional language or format so that your body can understand what's going on in the spirit realm. And the way that the brain does that is the brain takes fear, or it takes sadness, or it takes extreme joy or extreme elation. It takes these energetic cues that have gone in 100% energy formats up the nerve lines, okay? And it turns them into chemicals so that you can feel in your body the sensation of the spiritual impulse. Okay? So there's a lot of physics going on between your heart chakra and your brain, the two electromagnetic pieces of machinery in your body. So the body feels the empathic pulses that come through the heart chakra. That's why they always say that empaths are the big feelers out of everybody. We feel what's going on. And so when we think about the physics of how that's working and how our spirit needs a chemical translator called the brain to create a chemical language so the body will get up to speed on what the spiritual message is, and that happens in a nanosecond. Isn't that cool? I mean, really, we are literally walking around in some of the most advanced, if you want to call it biological computer technology ever designed. You know, the way that our mainframe, our physical spacesuit interacts with a spirit language that it can't touch, it can't taste, none of it. It can't do anything until the electromagnetic heart catches it, pulls it into the body, runs it up to the next electromagnetic organ that immediately recognizes what those spiritual impulses are and creates corresponding chemicals to the best of its ability to encapsulate the physical experience of that spiritual message. Now tell me that's not cool. That is completely cool. So, you know, people say all the time, love isn't real. Love is just a bunch of chemicals in your head. Well, where the hell do you think that the brain got the idea to manufacture those particular chemicals at that particular moment? It was hit with a spiritual impulse. It says, time to release love, baby. Woo-hoo-hoo! Because otherwise we'd be walking around shaking everybody's hand, falling in love. It's not just a matter of touch. It's not just a matter of spending time. There's a reason we trust certain people and we don't trust other people when we first meet them. It is a spiritual impulse. It is that empathic ability to connect and discern, which then is turned into an electromagnetic impulse, which then is turned into a chemical reaction, which then is turned into a translator device and fed to the body. Super freaking cool. All right. So we have a lot of physics to psychic abilities. So now we're going to go back to all this anxiety. So here I am, a young person. I'm maybe a teenager and I don't understand what the hell's going on. Not to mention I've got a chemical rodeo in my head anyway that would make the 1970s look banal. Okay. So pretty much I'm experiencing my own personal hoopla in my brain. Plus I'm an empath. So I'm picking up almost 8 billion other people on Earth's emotional output. And it's all coming through my heart chakra. It might make you a little anxious. So the reason I bring this to the forefront is because there's a lot of things that we can do to discern that feeling of anxiousness. Because what's happening is we're pulling in so much information, many empaths are, and it's such an oversaturated field And not only are there human brains putting out all of this information, all of these thoughts, all of these emotions, but let's talk about our cell towers. We've got 5G high millimeter arrays blowing out everywhere, which actually are not good for the brain and even for the body to a large degree. And we're putting those short little towers up all over the place. So that's interfering and that's coming through. It's an energetic signal, gang, so it's coming through the heart chakra. And then we've got thousands and thousands of satellites. Did you know that? We have thousands of satellites in operation in our lower atmosphere. And I mean, I'm talking space, upper atmosphere. It's in space, but it's close to the Earth. So we've got all of this energy beaming down to the Earth, and it's just beating the Earth up and beating up all of these biological units down on Earth called human beings that are born empathic. And then, of course, there are some folks who have an extra dose of that, which is the gift of empathy, which is the psychic gift. But everybody's empathic. It's so funny they say, oh, people on the spectrum, they don't have any empathy. Well, sure they do. They're just not exactly sure what the proper social cue is to show that it's important that they acknowledge it. They get it. They just don't know why it's important. So they feel it, and actually people on the spectrum are some of the most sensitive people out there. So when we're talking about the physics of the flesh suit, communicating with the spirit and why it's so important for our electromagnetic organs to be functioning properly for this, well, because we've got a bunch of kids coming up and a ton of them are on medication right now. And I'm noticing in our younger generation that in an attempt to find a place for everyone, in an attempt to make everyone feel comfortable, we've now created a bazillion labels for everything, and I oftentimes giggle about this because, geez, when I was growing up, I was just a boring, apparently, I didn't think I was boring, but now I'm just kind of a boring cisgendered lesbian woman, which means that I was born female. I identify as a female, so that's called being cisgendered. And I'm gay. I like other women, and that's pretty much it. I mean, if I had to categorize myself, I'm also Gen X, and we really hate labels, which is hysterical because we gave birth to kids who are now hyper categorizing everything. And it's actually in a really honestly good attempt. I mean, they're trying to make everyone feel like they have a place. So if we create enough labels for people, then pretty soon it's no big deal because there's a word for that. There's no outcast person because everybody has like a file folder, right? So I can see behind the energy of why we have so many of these labels out there. My generation, of course, it's not my generation to grab a label. We're not label people. However, I appreciate the spiritual lesson of why it's there now. And I do appreciate that we have, especially with our transgender community, holy moly, that is one hell of a walk. And I have been very dear friends with transgendered people. I've played in bands with transgendered people. I have learned a great deal from them because let's keep in mind now, I was born into a female body and I'm attracted to other women, yet I don't even think twice about being a woman. It's just what I am. And so I cannot possibly imagine being born into a body and just being like, whoa, man, I way got the wrong chassis here. This is not working. So that walk in and of itself would just be, to me, it would seem difficult. To my trans friends, they just look at me and they're like, well, whatever, man, it's just how I am. And I think, okay. And then I think of my Auntie Jan when I was a kid. And my Auntie Jan would say to me, when I first came out when I was 19 years old, she would say to me, kid, I'm worried. I'm worried that if you come out as a gay person, you're going to have a hard life and it would be so hard for you. And I would say to my Auntie Jan, she wasn't homophobic. She was just worried that, 25, 35 years ago, whatever, that life was going to be hard for me. And I said to her, I'm not worried about it, Auntie Jan, because this is just how I am. And I can't be anybody else. So we are who we are. It is what it is. Now, when I'm talking about all these labels, it's actually really a sociologically awesome thing that kids have so many options that they can choose to assign how they feel they are represented. So whether it's pansexual, you love everybody, male, female, a non-binary person, someone who doesn't relate with a gender, whatever, there's plenty of, if you want to call it, terms out there. So someone doesn't feel like the feelings that they have are way out in left field. And that half of it, that's a really good way to look at, if you want to, as Gen Xer, I'm a Gen Xer, we tend to look at that and say, oh, that's a lot of labels. However, that does give a license to many young people to be who they are, and that's fine. That's great. What we're talking about here is a lot of these young people are going through their normal bouts of anxiety, which happens when you're a teenager. And luckily, you're not having to hide being gay. Well, some people still might. Some young people still might. They might not have families who understand that. They may have religious families. They may have families that live in parts of the country that are not understanding. Yet, when we're talking about anxiety hitting our kids, then the first thing that modern society wants to do is smack them on medication instead of identifying the fact that, our millennial and below generations are mega empaths. They are absorbing so much energy, and we simply are not meeting them in the playing field that is necessary to educate them about all of this anxious. Now, obviously, there's teen angst, gang. Okay, teen angst, it's always been, it always will be, it's just part of life. Yet the teen angst is now met with a prescription. This worries me because not only are we over-medicating kids at a great pace, yet we're not teaching these kids how to productively deal with this flood of information coming through that heart chakra. Or just smacking them on meds and saying, yes, go see a therapist, you have anxiety. Now, I'm not suggesting people don't see a therapist. My whole father's side of the family was mental health and health. And so what I'm recommending is that we see the bigger picture here and recognize that a lot of our millennial generations are experiencing that the physics of the psychic ability of the gift of empathy, on top of having the teen angst, on top of a world that is now flooded with A, more people, and B, more electronic devices than Gen X ever saw. We are flooded with EMF poisoning every day. And I'll give you one big fat guess, which organ picks it up first and which organ picks it up second? Bingo, the heart, then the brain. You got it. So when we're talking about the physics of psychic abilities, we are talking about taking time with our young people to really talk with them about not only the stresses and strains and freakouts of living in a post-9/11 world where these kids are worried about lockdowns in their schools. It's a different world these kids are dealing with. To talk to them about how it feels to come together in community. Why we're not having meditation groups in high school, I have no idea. That should be something they're doing in gym class, which granted, it's physical education, but that's something that they could be doing and passing energy all the way around. This generation of kids is very tied in to the spirit realm, and they would get it, and it would help them feel connected and help them not feel alone. And we don't talk to our kids, or really sometimes even us as adults, we don't talk about it. We don't talk about the fact that we're anxious and we feel overwhelmed. So empaths out there, if you are feeling like you're just getting hammered with anxiety as of late, there are very good reasons. There are very good reasons to be able to really stand in that space and say, wow, I am overloaded. My nerve array is overloaded. I am completely overloaded here. And then be able to take some steps to help yourself and help your kids, because there are physics to why you're overloaded. So what do you do about it? Well, I talk about Epsom salt baths all the time, but it's really important. Physical movement, gang. If you can move that physical body, that's really important. If you're walking or getting your heart rate up for about half an hour a day, whatever you can do to your fitness level, that's important. Getting rid of gross sugars and other things that hop us up high as a kite so that it forces our heart to beat really quickly. The heart likes to beat quickly if you're moving the body, but just jacking it up like, John Belushi on a bunch of cocaine is going to be difficult. So allowing your body to move and allowing yourself to move the chi of the body. Also, when we're exercising, we're breathing heavily, and that moves chi, and that actually breathes out a lot of really scary things that we can pull up energetically in the self. Stress, anger, rage, sorrow. That breath, as we move when we're working out, it moves all of that emotionality out of us. Many of our young people, many of our teenagers, they move their thumbs. They're on the phone. There's a lot of kids who want to move. My daughter will literally ask to do physical activities because she understands, she can feel it in her skin, that if she's moving, she's going to feel a lot better. And she can keep that movement going. And it really does, help her out a great deal. So there are so many physics to anxiety alone that, again, black tourmaline, green tourmaline, bloodstone. These are all great stones to wear right over the heart chakra. Black tourmaline, green tourmaline, bloodstone. Angelite is actually a nice balancer of all of the chakral zones, yet works very well with the heart chakra. Rose quartz. Good old 1980s. Oh, look, I have a dolphin carved out of rose quartz that I got at Spencer's Gifts. Rose quartz. Rose quartz can help the heart chakra. Because joy, gang, the goal here is to get ourselves into a mindset of joy. And if we can understand the physics of our psychic abilities and why things are happening the way we are, then really pharmaceutical medication, in my opinion, really should be the very last ditch effort that somebody is resorting to because their quality of life is about ready to tank down the drain and they can't even leave their house. I'm not saying don't take pharmaceuticals. I'm simply saying let's look at the outrageous amount of anxiety that people are experiencing. Let's look at the opening of the gift of empathy in the heart chakra with millions of people. Millions of people are waking up every day and their heart chakra is wide on open and they're ready to rock and roll and they don't know what happened. So they're anxious. They're feeling pressure waves coming from the future because that's how the gift of empathy works too. Don't forget that. The gift of empathy works much like catfish whiskers. Catfish can't see on the bottom of a muddy river. They just can't see. But they can, their eyesight's quite poor. They can detect pressure waves in the water through those big long whiskers that they have. So catfish will lay in that muddy water and they will just continue to feel pressure waves coming. Now, the bigger the pressure waves hitting their antenna, the bigger the fish that's coming. Or the bigger the thing. It might be a log for all they know. I mean, they don't know what it is. They can probably detect the way that it's moving if it's alive or not. Yet we as empaths, we are so divorced from discerning what those pressure waves feel like when they hit our heart chakra. We're so clueless anymore. Society, oh man, it's bad, right? Which is why we do these podcasts, so we can learn all this stuff. So many empaths, we get insecure because we feel huge pressure waves coming in from the future, but we can't put our finger on it. We have no clue what it is, but boy, we know something huge is coming. Have you ever had that feeling? That's always fun, right? So you've got this big predictive pressure wave coming in. And what do, humanity? Do we just sit in the mud at the bottom of the river and say, that's a big thing. How interesting. I think I'll just keep my head down low and see what it is when it rolls over the top of me. Oh no, humanity. That's not what we do. We get into hyper meerkat freak out and we start matrixing with our brain. Because remember, the heart catches these pressure waves through the heart chakra. It translates them into electromagnetic impulses that it sends up the nerve relays to the brain. The brain grabs a hold of this big pressure wave reaction and translates it to a thought and says, wow, something big is coming. Well, if the human prefrontal cortex hears the word big, actually, we don't hear with the front part of our brain, but just go with me for this little piece here. If it hears the word big, what do? We panic, right? We're like, no, it's big, it's terrible, it's got to be awful. Because if it's big, it's God knows it's got to be terrible. Good Lord knows it can't be something positive. It's got to be absolutely rotten, right? So according to humanity, and we have millions of years of evolution trying to protect ourselves from impending doom and certain death. So it is a bit genetic for us to be a little hysterical. However, mind over matter, people. If we just took 5 freaking seconds to just calm down and see what the big thing that was coming, maybe we're going to win the lottery. Maybe everybody on the planet is going to win the lottery. Maybe the ETs are going to come home and fix our global climate change issues, and we all win the lottery. Maybe that's the big change we're feeling. It doesn't always have to be bad. Yet we as people notoriously matrix with the brain and decide that the unidentifiable large thing we're feeling is probably going to be terrible. So once we make that decision, then the brain starts manufacturing chemical that says panic. Here's your chemical that says be worried. Here's your chemical that's going to be adrenalized and get that adrenaline running and get your heart pumping because something's coming. Something wicked this way comes, right? Our brain goes to this nutty place. This is why it's important to stay in joy. So that when our catfish whiskers, called the gift of empathy, picks up a wiggle in the electromagnetic stratosphere of the spiritual ethers and sends it to the brain, we all don't lose our mind going crazy. How about, oh, wow, the brain just interpreted something big is coming. Oh, this could be awesome. This could be a huge big thing. This could be great. Well, right now I'm putting amazing vibes, amazing thoughts into the ethers, sharing the quantum field with ultimate possibility. So I am calling to myself this amazing opportunity. So I'm feeling something big. Why can't I make that big into amazing? Because we're taught to protect ourselves. And because it's a little genetic, so give yourself a little break. Yet let's start with our minds, gang, because we are all capable of changing our minds around. And we don't need gurus and we don't need tons and tons of self-help books. Although if you get a lot of edification from that, please continue on that path. I'm not saying that. I'm simply saying it's actually in your genetic code to be joyful. It's in your genetic code to seek ultimate peace and harmony. It's within you. All those ingredients, all those choices already are within you. And we have a lot of work to do, especially in America. I can't speak for the rest of the world. Yet in America, we've got a lot of work to do to deprogram ourselves from believing the consumerist doom and gloom that sells stuff, that sells tribalisms, that sells political franchises, that sells anything. So the physics of the psychic ability of the gift of empathy really do require some scrutiny. Because you might not need a medication for that. We just might need a way to expunge some of that extra energy or, God forbid, make another choice when discerning what the large, non-identifiable ripple coming in from the future is. Let's have some command over our minds and not just go into crazy panic mode and decide that what's coming is joyful and amazing. And this is hard if we're in the middle of a trauma. It's hard if we also have the gift of clairsentience or clairvoyance. So we're going to shift gifts for a minute. Clairsentience, of course, is the ability to just know stuff. You just get a download and you just know things about things. Like you might know how that car is fixed, even though you don't know how to fix a car. You might know what's just going on with somebody and what their life is all about, even though you just met them. That's the gift of clairsentience. Just a big cube of information dropped on your head and you going, oh, okay, well, that's what that's about. Then the gift of clairvoyance is seeing the future and being able to put future casts together to interpret future impulses. We do not have one big fat future, so being able to discern and define which future timeline holds the most weight, so to speak, which one is most probable, which one, there's many probabilities, which one are you going to choose? And the gift of clairvoyance gets crazy. Then we get the gift of divination. And that's casting runes or tarot or looking at signs and wonders. And the pictures deliver an awareness that the person is able to say, okay, hey, cool, this is what that means. And all of those gifts work through the third eye, the pineal gland. They work through the brain and the crown chakra. So when we're receiving all of this information through the heart chakra and we're receiving tons and tons of information through the brain, working through that pineal gland, working through that third eye, working through that crown chakra, we have both of our electromagnetic organs feeding one organ, which is the translator organ, which is the brain, information to try to generate chemicals to translate to the body what the heck the spacesuit should be doing and why we are experiencing what we're experiencing. So if you've got the gift of clairvoyance, clairsentience, divination on top of the gift of empathy, then you have two centers picking up two totally different signals from two different quantum fields, delivering all of this information through the electromagnetic firewire of the body called the nerve relays up to the brain so that the brain in a nanosecond can combine all of these spiritual messages and create chemical translators for the body. That's what's going on with you 1 billion times a day. And you wonder why you're tired. I mean, we don't talk about the physics of this stuff enough. Now, you got to remember that even if a person is not considering themselves spiritually gifted, we all are to some degree. The spirit does not get zipped into an old flesh suit down here without having some effect on the body. Everybody is psychic to some degree. Everybody is an empath to some degree. Everybody is intuitive to some degree. And we tell ourselves that those chemical translators that are being generated by our brain from the spiritual messages that are huge, being picked up by the brain and or the heart, we tell ourselves that it's crap. We tell ourselves it's not real. We tell ourselves, oh God, I just had, as Scrooge would say, I ate a bad piece of cheese and that's why all this is happening. Instead of just sitting with those impulses for one flat second and saying, wow, hey, maybe something's going on. And maybe I don't need to react to it as a physical being. Maybe I can just observe it. I can feel all this energy coming through my third eye, coming through my crown chakra, and it's immediately being translated into a chemical response so that my body can understand how to experience this. Fear, joy, adrenaline. What is the closest chemical interpreter I can find? And really, a lot of times, our brain has a set default for the unknown. So if we're feeling something and we don't have all the answers, if our catfish whiskers are picking up a huge pressure wave in the muddy river and we have no idea what it is, at the same time that the crown chakra and the third eye are picking up unbelievable giant messages that are so huge that we don't even know how to discern them, that's pretty much going to just hit the great big red shutdown button in the brain. So if we catch two of those impulses at the same time, unless we have taken the discipline to not blow a breaker, and we might think of a Jedi Knight having that kind of a discipline, or like a ninja, or somebody in special forces, or somebody who's trained their brain to not just have the chemical response and react to it, you obviously are going to have the response, but to also sit with it. Unless you're somebody who has gone through that kind of training or discernment or martial arts work, or those of us in the spiritual field who've worked with that impulse because we work on crime scenes, so we need to keep our bubble between the lines. If you're somebody just going through your life and you're nailed on those two centers, literally, your body just hits the emergency panel. All of a sudden, it's flashing bells and it's whistles and oh my God, look out, everybody, DEFCON 4, shut the doors. We got to lock the windows, everybody underneath the desk. This is terrible. That's actually a preset chemical response in your brain. Did you know that? Because for years and years, tens of thousands of years, humans have equated the unknown as certain death. So we don't have to have that response to the unknown, yet that is the go-to chemical translator in most people's experiences. Most people, it's funny, I'm going to back up a little bit. So my wife is a Taurus with a Leo moon and a Capricorn rising. God bless her. And she does not, now she does. We're going to be married 5 years on November 20th of 2019. And she does not, well, now she's better about surprises, but generally she doesn't like surprises because her brain is going to take that surprise and have a chemical response that's not that good. It's going to have a chemical response that's going to say you're in danger. And that has to do, with just her experiences. Now, 5 years in, if I surprise her, she's pretty much going to know there's something puffy with it. But it's taken years for her to figure out that a surprise is not something that could threaten her. A lot of people don't like surprises because it's the unknown. So just know that we can train our brain out of that. We can totally, train our brain out of that. Or we could be captive to thousands and thousands of years of predetermined genetic programming that's going to tell you that you're suffering. Which I think is, I love surprises. It's really hard to surprise me. I mean, you got to work overtime. My wife is really good at it. She's crazy good at it. It's almost scary how good she is. But it's really hard to surprise me. So my wife has gone through quite a lot to understand energy in order to surprise me. So if you think about deciding that everything can have or be met with joy, almost everything, there's certainly obviously things that can't. Yet if the unknown can be met with excitement and enthusiasm instead of fear, then pretty soon your brain is going to start manufacturing all kinds of other chemicals, because I'll tell you what our brain hates doing. Our brain hates making chemicals ahead of time that never get used. And it does. Our brain will make, I want you to think of a 55-gallon drum full of fear tar. And our brain will make up, if you're somebody who goes through a lot of fear, if you're somebody who goes through a lot of fear planning, fear reaction, whatnot, your brain is pre-making all that fear tar and storing it in 55-gallon drums so that the second you need it, it's ready to be there. That can pour it and make fear roads all over the place and you're ready to rock and roll. The brain is a very efficient organ. It's a phenomenally efficient organ. So we can also train it to make joy chemicals. So when the physics of our psychic ability trip a trigger of, say, the unknown through the heart or the crown or the third eye, and that electromagnetic signal is sent to the brain and it's time to make a translator, the brain isn't going to just reach, if it's in the unknown category, it's not just going to reach for the fear chemistry. It's going to start to produce excitement. Ooh, joy. This could be really cool. Okay, so what happens if you think it's going to be really cool and it gets there and it's disappointing? Well, if you've already positioned yourself in a state of joy, that the thing that comes in that's really big and awful, you are going to deal with that challenging situation in a completely different way. And you're going to deal with it not coming from the rears steeped in chemical fear tar, yet you're going to be already on the front end of, oh man, geez, here I thought I won the lottery and it turns out that there was a dam that broke on the west side of town and a bunch of people's houses have been flooded out. Oh, let's go help those folks. If you start in a place of joy and go to a place of crisis from a place of joy, you will shift into active participation in a solution in a snap. I mean, you'll have that nanosecond of, oh man, that's a bummer. I thought I was going to win the lottery and apparently a dam broke. Well, that was weird. We will have that moment of being human, gang. Yet there is that minute, that wiggle, that second where there is time to change our response to the crisis. And if it's coming out of love, if it's coming out of the joy chemistry of the brain, if it's coming out of the connective chemistry of the brain, because joy is a connective chemical, it wants to share itself. It wants to share itself with people. If we are hit with negativity or something very sad during that time frame, then hey, guess what? You're already, you've got 55-gallon drums of love Legos. So instead of the fear tar to lay the old same old road, you've got love Legos, and you can snap together bridges or make firemen or make a plane. You can make anything out of the love Legos. Actually, love Legos are way more flexible than the fear tar, because the fear tar takes a lot of heavy equipment. You have to stamp the road down. It has to be the same old, got to pour it out. Heck, love Legos, you can invite everybody to your love Lego bin, and you can build the most phenomenal things out of them. It's really incredible. So if we are going into a place of joy and we're starting to store up that chemistry in the brain, and we experience the physics of our psychic ability that ignite electrical impulses or electromagnetic impulses so that the spirit realm may translate or talk to the physical body itself. If we go through all of this and we pre-front load the brain with love Legos instead of fear tar, then your world and your psychic gifts and your spiritual activity in connecting with that world and in connecting your flesh suit and not having your flesh suit's adrenals burn out because you're freaking out every 5 seconds, and not killing your liver with pharmaceuticals that are being prescribed at breakneck pace for sleeplessness and, oh Lord, geez, all the anxiety medication that's out there is mind-boggling when we can just, again, and granted, some people need the medication. I'm not saying that. Yet most people can eat differently. They can exercise a bit. They can do a little bit of guided meditation. Stick in some earbuds, gang. We don't even have to come up with our own meditations. We've just got to follow somebody cool along in our mind and make the love Lego bins bigger than the fear tar barrels. Okay, so that's how the physics of your spiritual gifts work in your body and work with your body. And the clair gifts are really interesting. The clair gifts, clairvoyance, clairsentience, they don't actually affect the body in such a profound way as the gift of empathy does, because the heart has way more electromagnetivity. I can't even say it. Electromagnetivity running through it than the brain does. And the heart chakra is huge when it's pulling through all of this information out of the ethers. It's bigger than the crown. It's bigger than the third eye. And there's a reason for that, because if we had giant electromagnetic portals in our heads would probably blow up like a grape in a microwave. It would be bad. So we've got this big portal in our chest, and we're able to move that energy in a more efficient and effective manner. And this is why we see empaths oftentimes really struggling with feeling overwhelmed. And I'm not saying you're doing anything wrong if you're an empath and you've tried all the things, you've tried the tourmalines and the Epsom salt baths and changing your diet, and you're still out there working out and you still are crippled with anxiety. Well, obviously there's CBD products. People are talking about plant therapies now. Plant therapies. Now, I don't know a whole ton about plant therapies, so I'm not going to get really into that. But I can tell you that the limited amount I do know about it is that people are using, you think of a plant therapy like ayahuasca or a hallucinogenic drug or mushrooms. People are using that hallucinogenic drug, or what we used to call them hallucinogenic drugs, to be able to free the brain from its predetermined patterning of reaching for the 55-gallon fear tar drum to make the pathway of the thought. Because if you're tripping on something, no matter what it is, if you're tripping, your brain's all over the place. It's making new roads all over. It's deciding, it's experiencing all kinds of things. And it can make barrels of love Legos and start to make roads that way. And it can interrupt a negative skip, like a skip on the record, that the brain can be having. And the brain has muscle memory. It's not a muscle, but the brain has a similar type of, quote, muscle memory when building thoughts. So if we are experiencing the physics of our psychic gift of empathy, and we are experiencing the heart telling the body that, oh my God, something wicked this way comes because there's a giant pressure wave that I can't identify, yet I'm pretty sure it must be bad. So then my body starts grinding its adrenals, and my pituitary system is like, blah, and everything's freaking out, then I lose my capability to say, wow, maybe I should just reach for a bucket of love Legos. So I have known people who've gone through plant therapies who have lost the skip in their record to jump that, if you want to call it that electrical circuit that immediately says it's all bad and it's a trauma. And the plant therapies have been amazing for people. Now, again, I don't know a ton about it. I have friends who know a lot about it. And I've looked into it spiritually quite a bit. I've looked into it in readings quite a bit. I myself have never done it. I've done hallucinogenics back in the day, gang, but it certainly was not for any therapeutic reason. It was because I was like 23 at a hippie party in Seattle, Washington, and there was a bowl of mushrooms. So woohoo for us. Yet it's very interesting because the brain is going to map around its experiences. So if we understand that the physics of our clairvoyant abilities are going to be less hardy on the body than the empathic gift is going to be, it's not going to be as much of a heavy lifter, then it may be a little easier to have some compassion for our empath friends who are really struggling through tough times. So this is a ton of information in 50 minutes. This might be one of those podcasts where you go back and listen a couple of times because these angels have woven together a ton of information in how this is all coming out. Yet it's important to note that there are physics to our spiritual abilities. And I've known people who are clairsentient, clairvoyant, clairaudient, who can experience headaches when they're receiving a lot of information. Yet a lot of times the headaches that they're receiving are from high EMF environments. And anybody would get those headaches, even somebody who may not have an exaggerated clair gift, because the human brain, again, is an electromagnetic organ, and the human brain can get saturated. And we will feel a headache if we walk into a non-grounded room, if the wiring is poor, and there's a big EMF load. We learned through October's Haunted series that EMF loads can cause headaches, skin irritations, hallucinations, lots of stuff. The feeling of being watched. It's weird. So now that you know that there are physics to your spiritual gifts, it's important to care for the body in a way that the body becomes a more easy or active translator of these spirit impulses. And mediumship oftentimes it works in the same way that the empathic ability does, because mediumship is not only feeling or hearing or sensing spirits, but you're also feeling that spirit. Human spirits will speak to us through large emotional bursts. It's what they do. And we will feel them at the same time we'll be hearing them. Many people who do mediumship work can feel very overwhelmed. I do a significant amount of mediumship work, especially when I'm dealing with non-resolved issues for people, or I'm dealing with crime scenes. Spirits will tell you all kinds of things. So it's important to note that really fortifying the body is deeply important as we get into how we go about our spiritual gifts. And especially as we go on, especially as we add more people to the world, and we add more cell phones on the towers, and we add more towers to the earth, and we add more sky filled with satellites, it's important that we understand the physics. It's funny, flesh suit. I've been saying flesh suit for this whole podcast. When I was working with one of the lead writers on the CW hit series Supernatural, that writer at that time went on to be one of the executive producers, and then she went on to do other shows. Yet that writer, she's a really cool chick. And I worked with her for a year on how to identify and encapsulate angels and how to represent angels. And I had so much fun. We'd have these meetings, and I would literally tell her how these angels would speak. And then I would find that I'd watch Supernatural a couple of weeks later, and the character Castiel, here's the character Castiel speaking just like these angels would speak. And this writer, I'm not saying I wrote any of this. I did not. I just consulted with her for quite a while about angelic life, what they're like, how they work, how do demons work with them, how does this all correspond? And I kept saying flesh suit, flesh suit, flesh suit, and referring to our body. And my writer friend in one of these consulting meetings stopped me and she says, "You keep talking about a flesh suit." And are you talking about the body? And I said, yeah, because it literally is a suit. We come in and zip it up. It's just like a spacesuit, only it's made of flesh. And I cracked up because now, you hear Dean Winchester all the time on CW talking about the meat suit. The meat suit. I love it. It's cool. Anyway, it's fun to actually be able to sit with a very gifted writer who can take concepts and make phenomenal lines out of them. It's pretty incredible. So as you go forward in your meat suit with this particular time frame, with all of this insane saturation with EMF and more, if you can just remember that there are physics to your psychic ability, and those physics demand our attention, and we really do require our bodies, right, gang, our bodies right now require more assistance than they used to with our particular environment. They really do. And so if we understand what's happening to our body electromagnetically with our spiritual gifts, where those gifts are coming through, how big the body feels these emotions and translates them, then we're going to understand how to apply our gifts in the world and how maybe not to feel like we're so broken. I have so many baby people, it breaks my heart, that call me up and they think that something's wrong with them because they don't know how to deal with the anxiety and with the sleeplessness. And sleeplessness, wow, that's a big one that comes along not only with the empathic gift, yet the clair gifts too. And the brain needs a break from high oscillation EMF or RF saturation in order to allow our sleep cycles to happen. And we are finding that it's harder and harder for this to take place. It's harder for our brain to get a break, gang. And our brain is controlling, our circadian rhythms, our sleep cycles. For God's sakes, when we look at the brain, it can only handle being noodled with so much. On October 24th of 2019, there was an article published on the mindunleashed.com website that stated Scientific American, the oldest U.S. monthly magazine, issues chilling warning on 5G. And, I was just talking about 5G earlier in the podcast. And 5G is going to be one of the biggest bell ringers that we have. And we're not getting. The reason that Scientific American is coming out against 5G is because our telecommunications companies are not being honest about the fact that they aren't researching all of the effects of millimeter energy on the body. I mean, I don't know if you know this, but like 2G, 3G, 4G, that's all, microwave, sent by microwaves. And, I talk about EMF, but it's also microwave saturation. And with 5G, it's going to be the first time they've ever used millimeter rays for any of this. And millimeter radiation, it goes millimeters into the skin. And our eyeballs are the most susceptible to millimeter radiation. So there's a chance of a higher occurrence of ocular cancer or skin cancer, melanoma. It's craziness that our 5G is even being installed, and they have to put these towers every 100 yards or 200 yards around. They're very short because millimeter arrays are short burst waves, so they can't travel over long periods. And the reason they're very, very powerful, and they're really the reason they're putting these 5G towers up is so that our military drones will have a network that the military can co-opt off the telecommunications companies. So, this is a quote from Joel M. Moskowitz from Scientific American, okay? And the quote, and he's talking about the effects of 5G and why a lot of the telecommunications industries have issued statements saying that the scientific community is fear-mongering when they talk about the 5G millimeter arrays. So this is a quote from Joel M. Moskowitz from Scientific American. The telecommunications industry and their experts have accused many scientists who have researched the effects of cell phone radiation of, quote, fear-mongering over the advent of wireless technologies 5G. Since much of our research is publicly funded, we believe it is our ethical responsibility to inform the public about what peer-reviewed scientific literature tells us about the health risks from wireless radiation. So really, there is so much evidence that says, hey, 5G is a bad idea. And so when we're talking about understanding the human body, in addition to the physics of our psychic abilities, and then you want to throw a 5G network on top of it, before you run out and drown yourself in a pool of Xanax, okay, let's just remember that altering our thoughts, choosing proper foods, getting enough exercise, not necessarily getting into the fear consciousness with the 5G, but just being aware that it's something that could rank on the body. And let's raise our personal force shields called the auric field. Let's make those auric fields radiate so high. Let's radiate those with such joy, such love, such enthusiasm, such kindness. Let's create a waveform faster, stronger, and more dense than the millimeter wave that is thrown out off the 5G tower. And you know what'll happen? You will have your own personal auric bubble. This is a physics issue. You raise that vibration high enough, you'll go invisible. I'm not even kidding. That's how gurus do it. Real live gurus who actually studied the spiritual physics of transfiguration. They teach this back in the military. They teach all kinds of crazy energy shifting techniques to our soldiers so they can not be seen, or they can blend in with the wall, or they can be the ground and their energy signature isn't picked up. So before we go steep ourselves like a tea bag in the pharmaceutical industry, let's remember there are physics to your gifts. And we can make a big difference in the world by leading with joy and love, by keeping our daily actions focused on assisting others as well as ourselves, and creating a high vibration environment where what we have with our bodies is a walking, talking testament of transfiguration by holding that force field of love that even a 5G millimeter array cannot permeate. And that, gang, that is an actual physics issue. So let's all work on that. Let's get our joy in the right place and our love. Let's understand how the physics of our psychic abilities affect us. Let's understand that every person has psychic or spiritual gifts. They may not even know they have it, and they may not even know they're suffering with certain side effects of not understanding how these energies hit us. So let's have compassion, gang. Let's be hopeful. Be good to yourself. Take care of your body. It's the only meat suit you got this time around till you resaddle and get a new one next time. Everybody, take great care of yourselves. I love you very much. Let us create a high resonant world full of love and possibility. And I will see you next week.